So what I'd like to do today, as I shared earlier, is I want to talk with you about some books that I've read. And I've got a stack of books here. If you're listening to this, you can't see these books, obviously, but if you want to see these books and watch the video of this podcast, then you can do so at youtube.com/Order of Man. And that way you can subscribe and watch the video as well. We've all heard the term that leaders are readers. We've heard the adage that the man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read. And that's why I believe it's so important that we gain new information, we access new information, and a lot of that is going to be done through the process of reading. I spend some time every single morning and also every single evening reading a book, reading some words and some thoughts and works from other men who have gone before and people who know significantly more about certain subjects than I do. And I really feel like this expanded knowledge has helped me become a more capable man. Now, as you can see behind me, I've got up on these shelves some of my books. When I moved here to Maine, I gave away, I want to say it was close to 200 books that I gave away. And so I'm in the process right now of rebuilding my library. And what I thought I'd do with you today is share 7 books. These are 7 books that I believe, again, that every man should read, that you do well to read and might access or give you some newfound knowledge and perspective on subjects of what it means to be a man and how to build fortitude and think correctly and expand your mind and all these other things. So I'll get through it. I'll get through them, and you guys can decide what you want to read. I know as we come upon the holiday season, a lot of you are probably wondering what books you should read. Maybe there's some gift ideas in here, but you might have some downtime, and this is a good way to spend that downtime. So these are in no particular order. I just pulled off 7 out of my bookshelf, the 7 of my favorite. I've got, I don't know, maybe 100 books back there, maybe slightly less. And I pulled out 7 of my favorite. This by no means is an exhaustive list. So if you have other thoughts and suggestions and ideas, what I would encourage you to do is to leave your book suggestions in the comments below if you're on YouTube, or connect with me on Instagram or Twitter, both at Ryan Michler. My last name is spelled Michler, and you can access the books there that I went through and also make your own suggestions and comments. All right, let's get into it. The first book is As a Man Thinketh. I don't know if you can see the title with the glare or not, but the book is As a Man Thinketh. There's a lot of iterations and copies of this book, and if you were to go through my copy of this book, you can see just about every page looks like it's tabbed and highlighted and everything else, which is how I go through books. Maybe I'll talk with you about that here in a minute as well. This is a great book. I'm not entirely sure when it was written, but it is not a new book. Yeah, I don't think it has the date on here. It's not a new book, but it's a powerful book. And in it, James Allen goes through the reason that we need to have positive attitudes, the reason that we need to think correctly, the reason that we need to put positive and constructive inputs into our mind, because the way that we think about life and our performance and the way that we show up is going to naturally spill over into the way that we perform. So this is one of my most recommended books. I gift this book quite a bit, and it is, I believe, the foundation of growth and success in your life. Yeah, you're going to have to take action. Yeah, you're going to have to move forward and do some things differently in your life. But if you don't begin to think differently about your life first, it's going to be very difficult for you to create anything new in your life. Very short read. You could probably read this in an evening if you wanted to. I would recommend maybe going through it a couple of times. I read this a couple of times per year because it is such a quick read and so instrumental in helping me develop the right mindset and thinking correctly about my life and growth and my job and objective as a man. So again, first one, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. The second book, and again, these aren't in any order, is The War of Art. Not to be confused with The Art of War, but The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And the subtitle is Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles. Now, all of us are creatives. All of us. Yes, there's artists who are probably more creative than a lot of us, but if you're out into the world and you're putting a product, whether it's a project or a podcast like this, or some sort of art or music, or a job at work. We are all creators. And in the book, The War of Art, Stephen Pressfield goes through and explains how challenging it can be to be a creator at times. And the premise of the book is overcoming the resistance. And the resistance is anything that would get in the way of you doing the work that you love, you doing the work that you know you should be doing, that you want to be doing. And by giving this force, if you will, a name and recognizing it by the resistance, you adequately prepare yourself and arm yourself to battle that resistance. Procrastination is a way that resistance manifests itself. Hurdles and obstacles and objections and excuses are all different ways that the resistance manifests itself. And when you start to realize and understand that the resistance is there, then you will be better equipped to deal with it and drive on in the face of such resistance. Great book. Another short one. Seems like I like short books or something here, but I've got some longer ones here we'll go through. Anyways, quick read, and again, talks about the resistance and how you can go to battle with being a creative, which again, all of us are. So The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Next book, different kind of book. I know I talk a lot about self-help, and this might fall into that category, but it's a little bit differently. The book is called Endurance. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. The book is called Endurance by Alfred Lansing. And in this book, he chronicles and documents the exploration of Ernest Shackleton across Antarctica, and how that trip went horribly, horribly wrong, and how these men had to endure some of the most physically demanding and rigorous times that anyone could possibly experience. This book, again, Endurance by Alfred Lansing, was recommended to me prior to doing the Spartan-Agoge. The Spartan-Agoge is a 60-hour endurance event that I did 2 or 3 years ago, probably closer to 3 years ago now. And this was one of the books they suggested that I read prior to embarking upon that. And I'm really glad that I did, because as that Agoge got difficult, and it did, there was many times where I felt like maybe I wanted to throw in the towel, I was able to go back to the story of Ernest Shackleton and his men and that exploration they went on, and how horribly wrong it went and what they endured, and thought, if those men could endure what they did, then I can certainly endure 60 hours of suffering. So it's as simple as that. I continue to think about what those men went through. I continue to think about how tough they were, and strong and gritty and resilient, and all of the crazy stories that are inside of this book. So if you want something a little bit different that isn't necessarily self-help, although can be, kind of down that path, then I would definitely recommend Endurance, Alfred Lansing, again, Ernest Shackleton's adventures across Antarctica. Really, really good book. Very powerful. Will reframe the way you think about difficulty. All right, next book. This one's a classic. A lot of you guys are definitely aware of it, and I'm sure many of you have read this book, including some of these others. The book is called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You probably have heard a lot about Stoicism. In fact, inside of our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council, we're covering the topic of Stoicism this month. And, there's Ryan Holiday's books, Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, and Stillness is the Key, along with the Daily Stoic. Those are great books, and I highly recommend that you read those. But if you want to go to the source of Stoicism, and really get down to the root of what it means to be a Stoic and what the Stoic philosophy is all about, and how to incorporate it in your life to produce results, then this is what you need to read. Again, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I've got all kinds of notes and everything else here. Of course, I've got a little bookmark in there as I'm going through it currently. But a very powerful synopsis of what it means to be a Stoic, and breaking down the Stoic principles, and again, how to apply them in your life. I think there's a lot of misconception about what it means to be a Stoic, and I think in a lot of ways it has maybe even sometimes a negative connotation, which it certainly shouldn't. Anybody who really embraces and harnesses the philosophy of Stoicism is a better man for it, and frankly is able to produce better results. So yes, read Ryan Holiday's works, read the other Stoics. Epictetus is another great Stoic. But again, if you want to get to the root of it and you want to get down to what this is really about, then read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Some of the greatest men throughout history have had this included in their personal libraries. And if you want to be a great man, then you should too. And you should read it, not just have it in your library. All right, next one. This one's a little deep. I'm going to be honest. It's a little bit deep. There's a lot to it. And it's not a real easy read, but I think it's a valuable one. It's called Manhood in the Making, and it's by David Gilmour. And in the book, he documents his research and his studies throughout cultures, throughout history, and all of time. It's really fascinating because what he's trying to understand is how different cultures have understood masculinity and what they believe it to be. And what's fascinating to me about this book, again, Manhood in the Making by David Gilmour, is that there are striking similarities between most, if not all, cultures in the way they view masculinity. Again, we hear a lot about society believing that masculinity is a social construct. This debunks that. Yes, it is societally reinforced masculinity, but when you have cultures that aren't introduced to each other, that aren't familiar with each other, and again, most of them throughout all of history believe very similarly about what it means to be a man, then it kind of debunks the thought that masculinity is simply a social construct, and really supports the idea that it's biological, that it's innate and hardwired into us. He also goes through what he dubbed the 3 Ps of masculinity, which is inspiration for my 3 Ps of masculinity, which are slightly different. But he talks about the 3 Ps being protect, provide, which we address as well, and the third as procreate. So most of societies have believed that a man's job is to protect, provide, and procreate. Now, I don't include procreate because I know plenty of males who I would say that they are men who, for whatever reason, don't or can't procreate, and I don't think that disqualifies them from being a man, but I substituted that with preside, which is leadership. So great book, very detailed, very in-depth, well-researched, and fascinating, although maybe a little bit more difficult to get through. So you're going to have to determine if that's a book that you want to read. I think this is also one that's a little harder to find. Again, Manhood in the Making by David Gilmour, Cultural Concepts of Masculinity. All right, this next book. So we're on book number 6. This next book has quite literally changed my life. And the book, I'll just share with you here, is John Eldredge, Wild at Heart. Now, I'm sure that all of you have read this, and if you have not read this and you're a man and you're listening to this, you're wrong. You need to read this book. This opened my eyes to what it means to be a man, how we operate as men, why it's so important that we step into masculinity, some of the issues that we may have had as young boys growing up without fathers, and our view of femininity and masculinity. It's so good. Now, it does have a Christian undertone, and whether you're a Christian or not, it doesn't really matter. There's still so much valuable information in this book. And again, it will transform the way that you think about yourself, the way that you show up, the way that you view masculinity. And I cannot recommend this book highly enough. If there was a top 5 list of books that every single man should read, like the top 5, this would be in the top 3. Again, it's Wild at Heart, Discovering the Secret of a Man's Soul. Another book that I didn't talk about, because maybe it's not up there, maybe it's on my nightstand, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He is a survivor of the Holocaust. I believe he was in Auschwitz, and he goes through finding meaning and finding purpose in the most tragic and horrific times. So that would also be on that top 5 list, I think. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So there's a bonus book for you. All right. I have saved this one for last. Of course, I'm a bit biased because I wrote the book, but the book is called Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. I wrote this book last year, and I'm really proud of what this is. In it, I talk about that there is a battle for your heart and there is a battle for your mind, and how we as men need to reclaim our sovereignty and stop giving it away to businesses and our spouses and jobs and the government. And we need to reclaim and restore in ourselves what it means to be a man. I break down 13 virtues that we would all do well to adhere to. I also, in the back of the book, and this is the thing that I like most about this book, is that I give you a battle plan guide, which is an actionable strategy for setting up the next 90 days of your life. So as this year draws to a close and we consider moving into the new year with new goals and ambitions and desires, creating your own personal battle plan for reclaiming your sovereignty is going to be a very, very powerful strategy. I would say that these two books complement each other very, very well. Again, Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, who we've had on the podcast, and also Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men by yours truly. Again, I know, I get it. I'm going to get comments. Look, I'm a bit biased, but I wouldn't have written it and I wouldn't have put it out into the world if I didn't think that it was going to help and serve the men that we've been working to serve for the past 5 years. So there you go, 7 books. Now, what I would say about reading is don't just blast through these books. It's going to be very, very tempting to just burn through them as quickly as possible and check them off the list and tell me or anybody else that you read them and feel proud that they're done. And maybe you should feel a little proud that you read those books. But what I've changed in my reading strategy over the past 6-7 months is not to read for speed, but read for comprehension. Reading all of this information is fine and wonderful, but unless you're able to apply this in your life and really improve your own situation, it's not going to do a whole lot of good. So as you're reading, let me give you a couple of tips that have helped me. I do suggest that you learn to speed read. There's a lot of strategies and techniques that's outside of the scope of this conversation today. You can Google that. In fact, we have a speed reading guide on our website at orderofman.com that you can check out. But speed read, that might help you get through these quicker. But again, it's for comprehension. So as you go through it, don't feel like you have to rush through it. I like to ponder. I like to think about and reflect. So although I might read quickly, I'm going to go back and recap and review each chapter and subchapter as I go through it. The other thing that I do in my books, and I don't think this is tab, but this one might, yes. You can't really see it in the video itself. I don't know, maybe you can. But I actually just earmark the pages that are relevant and valuable to me. And then as I go through and I tab those pages, there's certain, I don't know if you can see that in the video. Yeah, you can. It's tabbed, and then there's a little green highlight on the segment that stood out to me on that page. And in this book, Wild at Heart, the thing that I opened up here is it's tabbed. It says, where does masculinity come from? And then I highlighted the phrase, masculinity is bestowed, meaning that not only is it earned, it's given. So this is the way that I go through and I document. I used to not tab or highlight my books or anything like that. And there's, of course, conflicting ideas. This is my book. This is my work. Not my book necessarily, but my copy of it, I should say. So I'm gonna use it as a tool to improve my life. And if I can tab these and highlight and put little notes in the margin, then what I do when I'm completely done with the book is I actually just go back through the entire book, but I only read the segments that I tabbed and highlighted. That's how I do it. That's how I've been able to read for comprehension, and then of course apply it into the battle plan, which can be found again in the last book I suggested, Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. So there's some pointers for you. There's some books to keep you occupied, to get you some new information. Let me recap, and then we'll call it a day and go get those on Amazon, and you have some reading to do over the next 30 to 60 days before the new year. So first one, Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men by yours truly. Second, Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. Third, Manhood in the Making by David Gilmour. Fourth, there we go, Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. Fifth, Endurance by Alfred Lansing, about Ernest Shackleton's trip across Antarctica. Sixth, Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. And then seventh, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And then I think I gave you a bonus one. Yes, the bonus one was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So you have 8 books that you can check out. All right, guys, I hope that helps. Again, that quote, see if I can say it without butchering it this time. The man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read. Read good books, consume good information, ponder this stuff, think on it, apply it in your life, and you will be a better man for it. If you have any suggestions or other book recommendations, if you're on YouTube, drop those in the comments below. If you're not on YouTube, get on YouTube, youtube.com/orderofman, and then also connect with me on social media and let me know what you're reading. You can connect at Ryan Michler. My last name is spelled Michler on both Twitter and Instagram. All right, guys, that's all I've got. We'll be back next week for another exciting interview and Ask Me Anything, and of course, your Friday Field Notes. So as I always do, I want to thank you for being on this path and on this journey with me. Couldn't do it without you, and I'm honored and inspired by you every single day. All right, guys, go out there, take action, become the man you are meant to be.